Welcome to Unity of Springfield, Adult Education, World Religions, and New Thought Christianity class. My name's John Braucher, and today I'm going to share with you some from a book by Matthew Fox that he wrote about meditations with Meister Eckhart. To start with, we're going to do some meditations throughout the class. So I'm going to start with just kind of introducing everybody to Meister Eckhart, who he is, and also Matthew Fox. It's an extremely amazing when I started I read the book, but then, which was just a little bit about both of them, but then I kind of researched them a little bit, and I was amazed by the parallels between these two amazing humans. So Meister Eckhart, and they're born 700 or more years apart from each other. So Meister Eckhart was on the earth between 1260 and 1328. He was born in what is now central Germany, and he died somewhere in France. Some of his writings were deemed to be the writings of a heretic by the current Inquisition of his time. Good morning. And he was a Dominican priest, very educated, was a professor at some time at the University of Paris, and he preached in Dominican convents. He was influenced by Aristotle, Pseudo-Dionysius, Thomas Aquinas, and he influenced Martin Luther, John Calvin, Eckhart Tolle, Matthew Fox, who wrote this book, C.G. Jung, and Martin Heidegger, and others. Some people saw him more as a philosopher, but he was really a theologian and studied spirituality. Matthew Fox, on the other hand, so it was 1260 that Meister Eckhart was born. Matthew Fox, who wrote this book, was born in 1940 in Madison, Wisconsin. And he's still kicking at 82. He was also formerly a Dominican priest. So that's just the beginning of the parallels. And he earned a doctorate at the Institut Catholique de Paris. So he also studied in Paris. And his doctorate was in spiritual theology, which he was encouraged to go there by Thomas Merton. He taught at Loyola University in Chicago for many years. In 1984, Cardinal Ratzinger, I love his name, later became Pope Benedict, had Fox investigated, and in 1988, Ratzinger forbade Fox from teaching or lecturing due to Fox's questioning the doctrine of original sin. In 1993, he was dismissed from the Dominican order for teaching some things which they didn't fit into doctrine. Close the door too. In 1994, he became an Episcopal priest. And in 1996, he created the University of Creation Spirituality, that in 1999 became a part of the Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Naropa, but it's currently a institute that has a lot of basis in Buddhism, but they're very open to many different paths that are taught there. Important tenets to both Fox and Eckhart include deep ecumenism, which is the really going out and studying different faiths and looking for truth wherever it might be found.
About a couple of these, Christian and the Jews, right?
So, excuse me, I'm just doing the
Yeah,
introduction.
we're having a talk.
Sacredness of nature, and then that all creation is considered an expression of God. So these are some basic tenets that both of them shared. Eckhart was a lot of his writings were found to be heretical, but he wasn't found to be a heretic. So he was not put to death because he actually died when they decided that his writings were against the church doctrine, and he was already in his 60s, which back then in the Middle Ages, Dark Ages, that was fairly old. He's some quotes that are probably familiar to you are from him. If the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough. That came from Meister Eckhart. Another one is, there is a huge silence inside each of us that beckons us into itself, and the recovery of our own silence can begin to teach us the language of heaven. So the next thing, I have a few handouts here for those that are here in the building. So what they, both Matthew Fox and Meister Eckhart have brought to us is something called creation-centered theology. And you can see how it's the impact that it's had on New Thought as well. Now, Eckhart, back in the 1300s, then the church said, people can't read this, but obviously people did. Martin Luther, for one, who was only 100 and some years removed from him in time, and he studied, and you can see in some of the Reformation documents a lot of the work from Meister Eckhart shining through. And it was a resistance of the very restrictive and at that time conservative treatment by the hierarchy within the Catholic Church. So there's four main processes or steps that are involved in this creation-centered theology, and it's like steps of growth or forces of growth that we go through. And the first one was called Via Positiva by Meister Eckhart, and Fox gave it the more modern name of creation. And Fox describes it as our first experience of God is in the beauty and glory, the power and the potential, the unlimits and the brilliance of creation itself. The cosmos and ourselves as microcosms and as images of the Creator are experienced not as objects out there, but as God-bearing sacraments. So that, and they both speak to animals, plants, and the smallest of creatures being important, and a reflection of creation and of God. So that's kind of the first tenet, is that creation is a positive thing that's of God, and that we are all that aspects of God, which obviously fits nicely within Unity teachings. Via negativa is the second process or step, and that's letting go and letting be. So and Fox writes, as divine as all creation is, the human person must learn to let go of things in order to let things be things, and in order that reverence might be learned. Things are not bad, but the human propensity to cling to things is harmful and creates the dualisms and delusion that result in sin, or the concept of sin. When we let go and let be, we learn new levels of trust, including trust in the dark and in our experience of nothingness, both personal and political. And the way I look at that, it's that you can't receive spirit and God if you're all muddled up in a bunch of crap and a bunch of stuff that's just gets in the way. And so that letting go and letting be is this process of just kind of letting go of the attachments that we have to that things should be a certain way or need to be a certain way, and that keeps us from being able to be in tune and be in sync with Holy Spirit or God or of our understanding. Via creativa, or as Fox names it, breakthrough and birth of self, God, and self as child of God. He describes it as following on the emptying of path 2. And path 2 is the letting go and letting be. Comes union, realization of union and birth. For Eckhart, all experience of union is meant to bear fruit. Quote, by their fruit you will know them. And so creativity is as much of a test of true spirituality as it is a result of it. So he's saying that when you are able to first let go of all the things that muddle us up and come into the silence, then we get in contact with spirit. And the result of that is this kind of a rush of creativity that comes, that's beyond anything we can make up. It just rushes in to us. And that he sees it as there's a fruit that is born. There's something that comes of it that is more than just an experience, a heightened level of experience. So that it moves us into action. The fourth process or path is via transformativa, or as Fox calls it, the new creation, compassion and social justice. So Fox describes it as the human person can be creative in evil ways. We can use our imaginations to create more pain and violence, more acts of sadism instead of less acts of sadism. Thus, Eckhart insists in very strong language that our spiritual life is not ended in creativity, but rather we are to employ our creativity for the sake of personal and social transformation. Justice and compassion are the tests of this authentic deployment. But here, with compassion, the spiritual path does not end. Rather, it returns to its beginning. For we were born in compassion. Quote, the first outburst of everything God creates is always compassion. The spiritual journey is a spiral that returns us to our starting point. Our journey is an ever-growing and expanding spiral in which our growth knows no limits. So those are the 4 paths or stages of spiritual development that Eckhart put out there. And he wrote this stuff, again, back there in the 1300s. And it was kind of hidden. All of the writings that we 100% know were from Meister Eckhart were written in Latin and had been approved through the very strict, so we know that those were his work. And then he did a lot of sermons and talks. And those he did in German, what they call the vulgar language of German, just the local languages. And there's quite a bit of those, but they're not 100% sure all the time that that's all his, just because it hadn't gone through all the steps, and they weren't really, they didn't have printing presses back then, so it was really a long time ago. And Fox was one of the first people, well, he was the first person to translate his works into English. They had been, the European languages had done some work on his work. There had been a few translations in a few European languages, but nothing in English until Fox. And so that kind of slowed the knowledge, so that it was really just theologians who knew Latin and some of the other European languages that were really aware of him. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're just going to go ahead and we're going to do some meditations. I selected some out of the book. I forgot the book today. It's just a little paperback book, 1/2 inch thick, big print. It's an easy, quick read, but it has selected meditations with each of these 4 stages of spiritual development that he talks about. So let's just kind of get centered. Have your feet on the floor if you're sitting or standing. And close your eyes if it's comfortable for you. And I'm going to go ahead and ring the bowl a couple of times. Focus on our exhale. Let the tension out of our physical body, muscles, and joints. And let the tone of the bowl end. About creation. All hiding places reveal God. If you want to escape God, she runs into your lap. For God is at home. It is you that have gone out for a walk. Now, I shall tell you something I have never spoken of before. God enjoys himself in the same enjoyment in which God enjoys herself. She enjoys all creatures. God finds joy and rapture in us. The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. Henceforth, each time that I hit the bowl, just return to the current space, the current moment, the current breath. The second path, letting go meditation. We become a pure nothing by an unknowing knowledge, which is emptiness and desert and darkness and remaining still. Think of the soul as a vortex or a whirlpool. You will understand how we are to seek eternally from negation to negation into the one. God's exit is her entrance. Above all else, then, be prepared at all times for the gifts of God and be ready for new ones. For God is 1,000 times more ready to give than we are to receive. Breakthrough or birth meditations. In this breakthrough, I discover that God and I are one. Let me express myself in even a clearer way. The fruitful person gives birth out of the same foundation from which the Creator begets the eternal Word or creative energy. And it is from this core that one becomes fruitfully pregnant. And in this power of birthing, God is fully verdant and is wholly flourishing in full joy and in all honor as she is in him or herself. The divine rapture is unimaginably great. It is ineffable. New creation justice and compassion meditations. The outward work will never be puny if the inward work is great. And the outward work can never be great or even good if the inward one is puny or of little worth. The inward work invariably includes itself, all expansiveness, all breadth, all length, all depth. Such a work receives and draws all its being from nowhere else except from and in the heart of God. Compassion clothes the soul with the robe of God and divinely adorns it. And those who follow compassion find life for themselves, justice for their neighbor, and glory for God. By compassion, the soul is made blessed. You may call God love. You may call God goodness. But the best name for God is compassion. The poor are all too often left to God. Therefore, forget those who are better placed, and remember the poor. Slowly come back to the current moment. Move your fingers. Slowly open your eyes. So now I thought it would be interesting just to kind of talk about the four stages or the four paths that Eckhart and Fox found to be a part of this creation theology, maybe how it kind of fits into our life and our community here. So to kind of recap, that first stage is just that awareness that God is just creation, and God is good, creation is good, and for all of us. And that we are all interconnected, that God's not out there, but right here. And the second one, the letting go and letting be, the idea that we have to empty ourselves in order to get connected. You know, either get plugged in to source in order to go to headquarters, so to speak. The third one is that path of breakthrough and birthing of the self, and tapping into the creativity of source. And the fourth, creating a transformation once that creative energy is on board, focusing that towards compassion and social justice.
It's the process of awakening. It's the whole.
Hello?
There we go.
It's the whole process of reawakening. That as long as you have judgment, you can't get there. because you're focusing on the outward and you're putting your attention on the outward, and you're not seeing that whole. You're not seeing that connectedness. And every trying to think of the word. Every path, every mystical experience has always gone through these steps. And it's when you get to that core that you can come back out and embrace the creativity. And that's the breakthrough. And it's this just really makes it pretty simple. That's where you go, and then you come back out, and it's the lotus coming into flower, or whatever tradition you're looking at. But it's amazing. So thank you.
Any other thoughts or ideas? One of the other things that the two men had in common, Fox and Eckhart, is that they both aligned themselves with feminist theology at the time. They, of course, it's different because it was 800 years between them, but Meister Eckhart spent time with, and in the Dark Ages, there was, women had some power within the church, and theologically speaking, and so he had aligned himself with some of those women, and he was one of the first ones that started using and took some heat, as did Fox, for using he and she in their texts. And as I said, they both were investigated. Cardinal Ratzinger was over in the organization within the papacy, which investigated to see whether or not you were towing the line, and
They actually at first did call it well, I don't know if it was the exact term, but it actually was something like the Department of Inquisition still, while he was alive even.
right.
I mean, it doesn't go not that far ago, it was still called the Inquisition.
Yes.
And he was a big one. They call it a different name now, but
Yes.
Ratzinger was
Papacy.
Pope
is papacy, yeah.
Yeah. The structure of the Catholic Church.
Where's that from?
The bureaucracy.
Where's that from?
Hmm?
But where's the Catholic Church from?
Well, both of these guys were Catholic priests at one point in time. Fox originally was, in fact, they were both Dominican priests, and then Fox got kicked out and became an Episcopal priest.
What's the Dominican arm? Where did that get its distinction?
They were a lot into theology and history, and they did just a lot of,
So is that an order like the Franciscans?
Mhm.
How
Yep.
do you know how that was determined, or it just?
You mean how they became a Dominican versus, they had callings, and you could apply to become in order, and you had to be chosen and accepted.
So they were monasteries at different.
And Eckhart mostly ministered, like when he did his talks, he mostly did it to clergy. He went to various cloisters and monasteries and stuff, and did a lot of his speaking to. So that's why one of the reasons he was so threatening, because he was creating a movement within the church. It wasn't just the laity that were hearing his word, but he was speaking to a lot of priests and nuns and brothers. Back then there were a lot more of the different levels of people in the church. But, and I don't, I'm not really a medieval expert, but I just know that, there wasn't much communication. Communication was slow. They were poor. The Europeans struggled with all kinds of disease and illness, and economics was not good. I mean, during the Middle Ages, the Middle East and Africa were flourishing, and Europe was in the dumps. Politically and educationally, during that time there was all kinds of mathematical advances being made in Iran, Persia, and other areas like that, and that's why they called it the Dark Ages in Europe, is because it just was downtime, bubonic plague, things like that.
Why do they call it the Dark Ages?
Just because it was a struggle time for Europe there. Lots of the little fiefdoms were fighting each other, and they, End of the Roman Empire.
So wasn't that kind of brought on by the destruction of the library at Alexandria and the hordes coming down and wanting everything to be a level playing field, so they destroyed all the knowledge, and so it went into a dark period where there wasn't the enlightenment that had been previous. What's his name? Phineas, whatever his name, from New England.
Mm-hmm.
He blamed the doctors and the clergy for creating the diseases through the power of suggestion, of wanting to control people. And that was his vision of why we have the diseases, is because it was to control us. And that would have, if you look at that, the curses that if you were outside of the way they wanted everything to flow so they could control you, then they would make suggestions, and people are so susceptible to those suggestions that I think there's something in Quimby, in what Phineas Quimby was saying, in that it was a control issue. And I think that's what brought about the Dark Ages, was the control of knowledge, so that they could control the people.
Yeah.
I heard the Dark Ages was because it was spiritual and economical suppressed throughout the whole Europe.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, that's an interesting thing, LB, and so I while you were talking, it spurred a little bit of a thing that is tangential, not entirely related, but Dark Ages wise, and how the diseases were kind of a part of the suggestion thing. Haven't spent enough time thinking about this to flesh it out, but the idea was interesting. Back in the Dark Ages, back in the day, we'll say 1,000 years ago, things like that, when people were simpler, might it be possible to... so the examination I kind of had was being simpler the power of your belief would be purer and stronger, because it's easier to believe if you don't know as much, if you don't, you are more like a child. Your faith could cause that disease, or could accept that suggestion, because you yourself are not as complex as we are today with our knowledge in the Dark Ages. And that I wasn't going anywhere with that, but just the idea of diseases being caused by suggestion and how powerful it could be on a simpler populace, which is what allowed the church to maintain such authoritarian and strict control over everything as long as they did. But that was the end.
Right. And of course, then the church and the Roman Empire were one in the same, basically, politically. I mean, there was factions and stuff, but it was still, and it was crumbling during that period of time. The hordes from Asia were coming in, and there was a lot of battles going on. So they didn't have this. It wasn't their glory time, you know. So yeah.
What years was that?
Well, Meister Eckhart lived from 1260 to 1328. And the Renaissance, came around 1600s. So it was kind of right smack in the middle of the Middle Ages when he was around.
I was just reading that he was basically forgotten for like 600 years because of the advanced qualities of his work and thought.
Sure, and also because it didn't get translated into other languages until later years.
Sorry.
And at the beginning, I had talked about some of the parallels between Matthew Fox and Meister Eckhart, in that they were both Dominican priests and had been both been investigated, and Matthew Fox set up a university, and that he then became a part of the Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado. So I knew you were familiar with him, that's why I thought.
So was it because he was a Dominican that he had access to?
No, he actually, he knew, I'm sure that's some of where he found out about it. Also, when he went to university in Paris, I'm sure he learned about it. And then he actually went and did the translations to his work from Latin and Vulgate German. And he translated the complete works.
It was time.
Of Meister Eckhart, yeah.
It was time.
And it had not been done in English and many other languages until he did that. They started looking at it, but again, it was only open to theologians and people who knew those languages in the 1800s. Is really when his people started getting curious, and the changes in spiritual ideas were catching up to his. But we've talked about that a lot. There's some of those basic tenets were knocked out at the Council of Nicaea, and where they actually physically beat them up and threw them out, and
And a few of them lost their lives too.
Yeah. It was hardball politics. And I thought it was interesting that even Eckhart used the word politic in describing that.
Did you want to read these?
Sure.
Okay, good.
Sure, we have some announcements. The inaugural Ozarks Festival of Faiths is Saturday, January 28th at 6:30 at the Springfield Art Museum. A variety of faiths will be represented, including Buddhist, Hindu, Baha'i, Sikh, Muslim, Jewish, Unitarian, and Native American groups. Please be sure to stop by the Unity table. So we will have a table there. And that's at the Springfield Art Museum. January 29th, the New Thought World Religious class will be presented by Amy Burnett on Michael Singer's Living Untethered. So I guess this is a follow-up book to the Untethered Soul. Also on the 29th, following the service, there will be a Planet Unity planning meeting. And save the dates, Drum Circle will be the first Thursdays of every month at 6:30. If you have questions, see Zach Miller or D.D. Arman. On Saturday, February 4th at 10 a.m., Sue will be sharing a congregational visioning. Our focus will be tapping into the superconscious mind to allow divine ideas to present themselves to create outside-the-box avenues of income for Unity of Springfield to thrive well into the future. Our YOU are hosting a Valentine and themed pancake breakfast on Sunday, February 5th, starting at 9:15 a.m. Holiday theme. Oh, Valentine theme. Okay. I thought maybe it was
President's Day.
Groundhog Day or something. That's my favorite holiday. Today there is a potluck followed by our annual meeting. So come on back here into this room and stick around after service and get some good food, and we will share a bunch of information and be open to collecting some more information. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.